have still got opportunity for our young people for 2026 to join us. So just being so early in the year, we just wanted to make sure that if there's other people out there that would like to start, that we so we've offered a few face-to-face and online as well. But the whole purpose of tonight is really so that you can kind of get a crash course of what IDEA is, and if it kind of fits. IDEA is quite different, and so you get like I guess a very high level overview of what it is. And that means that by the time we get to meet you and your young person, if it's something that you think could work, the whole conversation then just becomes about the young person in the room and what they're really looking for and seeking for their education. So we this is probably the longest that we will talk ever at people. But if questions come up throughout the session, just whack it in the chat, and we will turn the mics on and have the opportunity for Q&A at the end. And then you can always, we do have a face-to-face coming up as well, so you might want to come in and see the hub at some point. We'll just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting this evening, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nations. Well, that's at least where I am at the moment. Beck, I think you are probably in a different space at the moment down south, but wherever you are, we do want to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and really kind of sense that here in St George's Terrace where we are tonight, in our city hub, we sense that sense of community and of our predecessors in this space. So this evening, we will go through a bit about the story behind IDEA and how we got to where we got to, and why. The why is really, really important for something so, I guess, out of the box. We had to have quite a personal story that attached to that to get through. We're going into our 5th year this year, and it hasn't been an easy journey when you up against a 250-year-old system and trying to do something different. It certainly comes with its challenges, but it has absolutely been well worth it. So that provides a bit of context for you. Then we will talk a little bit about what, I guess, the science behind IDEA and how we landed there, and have created what we've created today. Then Beck will talk to what the Academy actually is and how it's different to mainstream schooling and some of the traditional schooling options out there, as well as kind of clarifying what a day in the life of a young person who attends IDEA would be. Just wrapping up at the end, obviously we'll open up for questions and answers and talk about what the next steps are and how you can go about connecting with us if it works. So to start off with, a little bit about our stories. I am the mother of a young person who did not quite fit the system, so I can deeply empathise with many of you on the chat this evening. My son has dyslexia, but it was all throughout school. He just was kind of a bit of a square peg in a round hole, as many of you, I'm sure, can empathise with. And so going through his schooling experience, it really, really started to impact his mental health, but more importantly, what he thought he was actually capable of. And what we had is a really great kid who wanted to learn, incredibly creative, but every day he'd show up at school and it just it reinforced really what he couldn't do or what he wasn't naturally good at. We put him into high school. When we got to high school, we're like, okay, how's this kid actually going to get through? He did okay. Like socially he was fine, but everything was just harder than it actually had to be. So when I was looking around for options, which, as I'm sure many of you have done, the sleepless nights worrying about your young person, what's next, what's out there, how can we get him through? I did the same kind of searching. I was like, well, really, school is school, whether it's alternative or mainstream. They're actually under the same schooling structure, and a lot of the other options that were out there just weren't what he needed. So we really, really struggled to find something that was going to fit him. And so there was just the 5 years of high school education was a really tough slog. Now, my career, I was working in education policy, and my whole entire role was to look after the policy suite that sits around senior secondary. And when they raised the school leaving age, there was a big policy push to say, okay, well, we've now raised the school leaving age. What are we going to do with these young people? What options are out there? So I was really fortunate working for the School Curriculum and Standards Authority, the organisation who writes the WASE basically, and all of the WASE rules and curriculum. So I worked there. I got to travel around Australia in that role, working with our CEO and cross jurisdiction, working with industry, universities, training, and exploring the question of how do we best prepare young people for the world beyond schooling. And so my portfolio basically encompassed anything that wasn't examinations, through all the vocational education and training, career development, all of that stuff. I also worked in leadership positions in schools. But that was basically when I was kind of researching IDEA, and I also worked for the Department of Education in vocational education and training. So I kind of had this career experience, and particularly of the policy structure. So I had this lived experience of of having a young person who didn't quite fit this system, and then the policy know-how of. Where I kind of landed was like, it doesn't actually have to be this difficult. Like it shouldn't be this way. And then I could see that there were opportunities within the system to create something that was different, that was really high quality alternative to schooling. And so that's where I kind of started my journey in creating the blueprint for IDEA and going out and doing some of the initial testing. And on that journey, I met Beck along the way.
Yes, hello. My name is Rebecca. Yeah, so my kind of journey into IDEA came from inside the system. I was a teacher for a number of years, teaching high school science and maths, and pretty much straight away from starting teaching, I guess, I just became quite disillusioned with how it is in a high school in particular. Most teachers will get into the role, all teachers get into the role because they're kind of passionate about supporting young people. But the reality is that in a high school, you're seeing up to 150 kids a day, 50-minute blocks. There's just no time to really get to know the students in front of you, let alone personalized to their learning needs. And then you kind of layer on top of that the fact that you need to push through set curriculum and set assessments, at the same time as everybody else, delivered in the same way. It just, the administrative burden on teachers is so high. And then ultimately students are the ones that that kind of are disadvantaged in that structure. And so, yeah, it just didn't sit right with me, particularly because the students that were underserved by that structure and that were feeling like, I guess, like Nicole's son, Dylan, like I could see that they were just getting the wrong messages just because maybe they weren't performing academically on paper, or they just weren't engaged in the topics. And so they were kind of getting this message that they were like failures or less than, when in actual fact, like most of those kids, I was like, you are such a legend, like quirky, funny, creative, sparky. And like, they just, I couldn't teach in that system anymore. So I got interested in, well, how, surely we can do a better job. Surely we can do different things differently within schools. So as a teacher, I started doing some research on like, how do we do more integrated approaches to learning? So looking at STEM education and STEAM education, integrating arts into science and that. How do we do integrated curriculum? And that then it started as that like project-based learning integrated curriculum. But really it was like, you can do so much as a passionate teacher, and, they're always the ones you remember, those teachers that are super passionate about what they do, but you hit up against the structures of either its leadership within the school. So you might have one passionate teacher who's kind of unsupported to scale anything, or you might have a really phenomenal school team and principal who's super visionary. But again, they hit those systemic barriers that, we have to do things a certain way. And there's just restrictions on the kind of core structures of high schooling. So I jumped out of a school, my gosh, 10 years ago now. I've kind of been in and out of teaching, but I went into full-time research and started working for a philanthropic organization who was working with schools. They were called Fogarty Foundation. And part of one of the portfolios I was leading there was called Ed Futures, which was basically looking at, well, surely we can do something different. What's the future of education in WA looking like? And again, like going in and visiting different schools, there's such an appetite for change. But even the kind of most innovative schools, there's, when you go in and kind of see how things are done, it might be like there's an hour a week of like a STEM club or an innovation club. There's just nothing transformational happening. And part of that is just because of those systemic barriers, I guess. And so we looked as a foundation to say, well, could we kind of lead some policy advocacy and to change things? And that's where I was introduced to Nicole then, who's obviously had been working with the department at the time. And yeah, we spent about a year together, like advocating for change, being like, come on, there's so much cool stuff happening. And part of that was looking at developing the idea model and like, here's how it could be done. And I think by the end of 2019, we were just so bored of sitting in the same meetings, hearing the same thing. Yes, we need to do better by our young people, but nothing actually happening. So one crazy night, I think we just decided, well, let's just try and do it ourselves. And here we are 7 years later.
And I guess being within in the system, we are basically going through a cycle from one election to the next. And so it became very clear to me, even though there is absolutely the intent and want for there to be for systemic change, even the I guess the political structure of education doesn't really actually allow for risk. And so that's what Beck and I kind of in the design of IDEA, we're like, well, we pretty much, we think we know how we can do this, and we are building kind of a policy advocacy piece to de-risk the change. But what was also incredibly evident was that nothing is happening anytime soon. Nothing that is truly transformational is happening anytime soon, and that's why we kind of set about doing things, getting on with it, I guess. So then, in terms of creating IDEA. I saw that there was a screensaver before. Okay. Oh, our team, of course. So we started IDEA with about 12 students and 3 staff, and today we're in year 5, and we have about 20 staff now serving over 200 students. So it's a small but mighty team, and everybody that you see here are at the top of their game. The thing I love about IDEA is because it is not a school, because we are outside the box, everybody who is attracted to come and work at IDEA are pretty special. They're pretty special people. They are experts in their field. We draw from a range of industries. So we have experienced teachers at IDEA. We have qualified trainers. Anybody who's delivering anything is a qualified trainer. But one of our, I guess, requirements for coming to work at IDEA is that you've had life outside of an institution, and typically a school, that there is a story that comes that you bring to IDEA and experiences that go beyond the classroom. So we're very, very lucky to have the staff that we have, and our young people certainly are led by, mentored and taught by experts every single day. We're a pretty phenomenal team. Beyond that, our community does change, and it depends on the needs and wants of our young people, but we are loved by the community. When I was doing my policy work, when I'd meet with industry, all they ever wanted was a seat at the table of education. And certainly there was, there were projects and initiatives and consultations that were done that brought industry in for opinion, but there was not really any opportunity where we were co-delivering and really supporting and mentoring the future of our workforce and our world. And I think that's one of the loveliest things about IDEA is just how collaborative it is, and our young people get access and exposure to so many different areas and stakeholders of community as well. Got the next bit. I've forgotten. I'm usually on overdrive. So in terms of creating IDEA, again, this was not dreamt up overnight. There's obviously the personal experience, but both Beck and I, being in the space that we were in, had access to a lot of research and a lot of exposure to the consultations and things that were going around. But essentially, I think the biggest thing for us was that 1 in 5 young people, it's actually closer to 1 in 4 now, are actually leaving school early. And that's a huge sign that there's something going on for, a group of young people that just the system, despite their best efforts, is not appropriate for them. It's not that they can't do it, it's just not meeting their needs. We also can see that homeschooling is actually the fastest growing education sector in Australia. And obviously that was accelerated by COVID, where our young people realised that they could actually probably get through the content that they needed to in 1 or 2 days. And then they were left to their own devices, able to kind of bring in things that really mattered to them. We know that our young people are really feeling underprepared for the world that they're entering as well. And so that's a huge bit of feedback, and something that we take very seriously at IDEA is like, I think with schools, for instance, there's a huge focus on completing schooling, and the examinations and curriculum really focus on making sure that they've got that general education, they can recall the knowledge that they have been provided with through the curriculum. At IDEA, we actually see the 1 to 3 years that we have with our young people as the first few years of their career, and just that mindset flip really creates a different experience for our young people. Everything that we do is about preparing them for that transition into adulthood and to civic life as well, and the workforce. So there's the research. There's copious amounts of it, I can tell you that. But we also have always kind of adopted a human-centered design approach, and that's been achieved by just speaking to literally thousands of families and young people. And so when COVID hit, the year that we were going to launch it initially, being in Western Australia, we were actually able to deliver a version of IDEA, specifically around for homeschoolers. They were typically able to access it a bit easier. But we got to speak to many families and say, okay, so what's going on for you? Why have you left education? Why did you never enter education? If you could design your ultimate experience, what would that be? What do you want out of education? What do you need? So we have just taken everything. IDEA is not rocket science. We've kind of cherry picked from really great things that are happening in the system. We've cherry picked the best bits, and we've incorporated that with ultimately what our young people want and designed what we have today. I mentioned before about industry's desire to kind of be connected with our young people. They are ultimately the beneficiaries of our young people in terms of the workforce. And so, the feedback always was that what business and industry really need, and what young people are leaving school with, is actually the gap is actually getting wider and wider. And so the opportunity to spend a few years working with young people to help them prepare actually smooths out that transition significantly. Those sleepless nights that I spent certainly looking for the available options for my son, it sent me overseas, essentially, some of this research, and all the schools or the school alternatives that were around were in America and the UK, places like Nuvu, Boston Arts Academy, High Tech High. They were all really offering something that was student-centered and interest-driven as well. And I thought, gosh, why can't we actually have something like that in Australia? Why do we have to go overseas? How can we actually bring something like that to Australia? Beck, do you want to talk to some of your inspirations?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think this was the nicest part of designing IDEA, was that being able to cherry pick. So we weren't reinventing any wheels, but we're picking the best of the best, both from inside education, so charter schools in the States, Steiner, Montessori, but even outside of education as well. Some of our key inspirations were, well, one in particular was the advent of co-working spaces. So Space Cube there, which is where our Flux campus in the city is based. It's one of the largest co-working spaces in Perth. So there's 450 member businesses within Space Cube. And so what co-working is, if you're not familiar with it, they're basically just spaces where, if you are a sole founder or just starting a business, or maybe you have the head offices over in Sydney and you're just a small team in Perth, and you don't want to be just fully working remote or working in your garage, you can actually book a space at a co-working space. You can either hot desk, or you can book a more semi-permanent desk, or even a small office. And so what the co-working space provides is space, a desk space, and then also community. So you have hundreds of different businesses all coming together. Everyone's working on their own things, but the co-working space then provides networking opportunities, a vibe, different events around the industries that they focus on. And they're really contemporary, cool spaces. And we just love that idea. We're like, well, why can't it be the same for young people and learning? Why can't it be young people coming together, all working on different projects with different aspirations and goals? And then it's the actual, the space itself is like accelerating that and providing opportunities for networking and kind of niche focus. So that was very much a big inspiration for IDEA. And when you come in to visit our campuses, you can see that in the spaces there. And then, yeah, things like online learning. I used to run a network called Coder Dojo. It was based out of Ireland, but WA had one of the largest regional networks for a little while. They're just computer programming clubs for kids. But the amazing thing about them was there's no expert teacher up the front teaching robotics or coding. The idea behind the dojo is just that you give kids access to the internet, and then you have adult mentors and coaches there to guide them. The kids self-teach, they work on projects, and because they're interested in what they're doing, they do absolutely phenomenal stuff. And if anything, a teacher would probably just get in their way. So we just loved that model of actually just helping young people teach themselves and like really focus on niche interests, and then creating the vibe around that. So yeah, certainly was the best part of idea, and it's not done. We're always looking at, well, what are our cohort needing, and what are the kind of coolest things that are emerging and trends, and what do our young people need, and just designing in response to that.
So therefore, with the limited options, what is out there? So with our School Education Act, our young people need to be in full-time education, secondary education, basically up until the end of year 12, essentially. The alternatives, the options within the system, and again, I'm sure that many of you have kind of already looked at this. There's online schooling or distance education, which in the public system you need to be referred to. Essentially, it's not an and if you're living remotely, that's fine. But our young people have really found that quite isolating. There's an emergence of micro schools, so that's where a registered school has an annex hub somewhere for that it can cater to more niche learning styles, I guess. But the micro schools are still essentially a school and have to meet the same requirements under the School Education Act and curriculum as well. So the WACE is still applied for year 11 and 12 students. There's some great specialist programs out there, and there's obviously the gifted and talented education. So that caters for a lot of the young people who are kind of looking for more. They're highly competitive and very much focused though on academics as well. So my son had that experience where we were looking at options for him. He's a super creative kid, went for GATE. He was in year 7, the first year that year 7s went to high school. So there was 600 applicants for 60 spots in the creative arts program at John Curtin. Got through to the end of the practical. Being a dyslexic, absolutely bombed out in the academic test. So therefore, we were left with that. We had to cross that option off the list. For young people who have got significant social and engagement issues, care schools have been developed, and they really focus on building the young person's capacity from a developmental and pastoral care point of view. So that's also not necessarily appropriate. I certainly kind of thought that might be something for my son, but it didn't cater for his needs. And then there's the concept of the senior campuses as well, where it is a public school and it focuses just on year 11, 12 students, which is great. But again, the WACE is there. And so that's not necessarily best fit for everybody. So if schooling doesn't work, then our young people can go into full-time training. And full-time training can be done at TAFE or private training providers. But the problem with that, TAFEs are great options, vocational education training. However, they're just not designed for young people, particularly 15, 16-year-olds who need mentoring and support, and they just need to be teenagers. They're basically in the adult world. They need to have made a decision about what qualification they want to do. And it can be really challenging for our young people to kind of stay engaged and exploring and receive the pastoral care that they really require. Failing that, then there's obviously an emergence of homeschooling. I always say that my son wouldn't be alive today if we took that option. We definitely could not have homeschooled him. But again, homeschooling is really tough on families. It requires one of the family member, one of the parents to essentially give up a wage. And so that's particularly in our economic climate today, that's becoming really difficult for families. Particularly, we're talking about high school students here too, and we're talking about senior secondary, so 15 to 18 years of age. So it gets tough. 15 to 18-year-olds don't want to listen to their parents. They want to get information from other people. And then there's obviously the employment pathway, and we know that can be a really long, arduous road. If it's leaving school and going into employment, the only jobs that are available are low skilled, and so that is also not an appropriate option. So when we were looking at we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. IDEA actually brings all the best bits of that together. So if secondary education doesn't fit, vocational education training, employment and homeschooling are not an option. We elected to become a vocational education and training provider, but provide a school-like experience that maximised our young people's exposure to the real world and employment opportunities. So that's essentially where we landed in terms of the model. We also got really intentional about who we designed for. So we didn't want to create something that for young people who were already served in our system. And as I mentioned before, the system actually meets the needs of many young people. They may not thrive necessarily, all of them, but they certainly get through, and that's great. We've got the academic extension programs, which are great for a cohort of young people. And we also have the other end of the spectrum for young people who need a lot more support in care schools or special education programs and stuff. But it was really what we noticed, the kids that were really missing out and under-engaged was that middle rung of young people in school that kind of went under the radar. Some of our young people are doing quite well, and they're kind of held back by school. So we talk about that concept of being under-engaged and their efforts really not landing anywhere. So we've kind of identified the 3 distinct personas that IDEA has been designed for, and our young people kind of sit on the spectrum of that. First of all, we have Tide here. All of these young people, by the way, are real kids that we've worked with. Any of our socials, those young people are our students and our learners, and they're amazing. Everyone's got a story, but Tide is who we would call our ambitious overachiever. So these young people could do quite well in the system. They may be on track for a 98 ATAR. They can be socially okay and doing quite well, and they could probably get through, but they are totally underwhelmed by their experience and they feel quite held back. So our default answer when they land at IDEA is yes. We open the gates and we want them to run as far as they can towards their goals. And so they're just feeling very unchallenged by the system and held back. And so our focus with these young people is to really help them to clarify and accelerate their pathway. And they do amazing things. We've got partnerships with universities, the West Australian universities, for a lot of them to start their undergrad units, which is a great try before you buy approach. And so we've got some pretty busy young people like Tide. Next, we have students like Micah. So this is probably where my son fit in. And we kind of describe these young people as divergent disruptors, not because they're naughty at all, but they can be a little bit more sensitive. They may have they may be neurodiverse or creative. And these young people just need a lot more, they need to gain some confidence in themselves as learners. They are actually phenomenally talented, this group, but they just haven't been able to develop those skills or feel good about what they can do at school. And then we have young people like Teak, our beautiful connection-seeking independence. So a lot of these young people were our homeschoolers. They were doing online learning, and they actually really know how to curate their learning experience. They're good with that. They get on with it and know how to engage with community, but they feel quite isolated, and they want that connection, and they want the support structures, and they want the guidance to really shape their futures. And so they come to IDEA and land pretty well, actually, because we always think that IDEA is a really natural progression from homeschooling because of the co-design of their experience. So this is a little clip of one of our ex-students, Luca, and his experience at IDEA and what he did.
When I was homeschooling, I needed to do something for year 11 and 12, and I didn't really want to go to a mainstream school. So my 2 options were going to TAFE or coming to IDEA. I couldn't really pinpoint what I wanted to do at TAFE, so I decided to give IDEA a shot. So on Thursdays, I do work experience at an IT support company, and on Fridays, I am doing a Cert 3 in IT with a cybersecurity focus. So I'm interested in doing business in the future, and I believe IDEAcademy will help me because it's very tailored and personalised to what I want to do.
So that's Luca when he was in the Year 11 alternative program, which we now call Intern. And Luca did exactly that. He got his Cert 3 in cybersecurity and did hundreds and hundreds of hours that year as an IT support business. but then decided he didn't want to do that because he saw a mate over the holidays with a ute and wanted a ute. How do I get one of them? And so went into trade assistant in his graduate year, and started furniture making, and his entire project centered around that. And the day after he left IDEA, he had landed his apprenticeship and commenced as a cabinet maker, which is a really great example of what you can do at IDEA. We want them to test their pathways and get really clear about what it is that they want to do, so that they land and transition beautifully onto the next steps. Let's hand over to Beck now to talk a bit more about our academy and the student experience.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. So yeah, at IDEA, we often talk about 6 key differences between IDEA's model and a mainstream school. The first being, well, we're not a school, so we have a registered training organization. But yeah, as we mentioned, it was really important for us not to become a school, because ultimately that's the kind of system or the policy constraints that our demographic of young people are looking to leave. And so we don't call ourselves a school. We call our hubs co-learning hubs. And as mentioned, they're modeled off co-working spaces. So when you come into the Perth CBD hub at Flux or William Street, you'll see that they're quite open plan, contemporary, lots of little nooks and crannies for the kids to go in and hide and huddle. So again, it just kind of feeds into that idea of flexible learning. And then at our Frio hub as well, for those of you who aren't familiar, Frio is within the Piazza and part of the Piazza redevelopment as well. So that kind of same aesthetic, but definitely with a Frio vibe. We love our campus there and how it's developing. The second one then being that it's really about co-design as opposed to one size fits all. So at school, particularly once you get into that year 10, 11 and 12 space, just having that set curriculum and often kind of like each year, once you kind of pass year 10, is a bit of a rinse and repeat of the previous year. And it just doesn't suit all kids. And if you're not motivated by what you're learning, it becomes incredibly difficult to actually stay engaged. And so what we do at IDEA, we do have a kind of a skeleton framework of set qualifications that we offer, which I'll speak to in a minute, vocational qualifications. But we've specifically picked the quals that we offer because really they're about transferable skills, project-based learning. And so our young people then can add in the particular context that they're exploring. So firstly, they might have no idea what they want to do, which is totally normal, especially for our new students in Rookie. So the program's really about starting to figure out what you might be interested in and exploring different career options. But then as you move into intern and grad, maybe a student like Luca, for example, will be like, yeah, I'm thinking I want to do cybersecurity and IT. And so the program can actually be designed around him. Not only can he feed that into his project work at IDEA to get his credentials, and that's certainly what he did with his cabinet making in his grad project. He built furniture as part of his grad project. But equally in those flex days that we'll talk about that are totally personalized, it could be trying work experiences in a particular industry or learning and adding additional micro credentials onto your program. So it's an ongoing conversation with the young person, with the family as well, basically to ask, well, what are you thinking right now? Where are you at? Do we need to push you more? Should we pull it back? Are you ready to go out into the world, or do you just want to still kind of stick with IDEA and just get used to us? So plenty of opportunity for co-design. And again, that's really done on that kind of individual basis with the young person and the family. Probably the most important feature or difference between IDEA and a school is the relationship with the adults at IDEA. While that we are ex-teachers, we sometimes refer to ourselves as teacher refugees. We're like, we wanted to be in the system, but we had to escape. So we may be qualified teachers, but it's really about having that relationship with the young person, that we're their mentor, we're their coach. Always that sense, and what we love and what's often reflected back is that when young people come down the stairs, they just feel that, the adults in the room are there to back them. We get them, we know their full story. And that's the benefit of having, rather than being the high school teacher with 150 kids you might see in a day, that you've really got your key cohort that you're managing, kind of more like a primary school model in that. And it's really because we invest heavily in the relationship building, because if we know the young person and we know the family, we can actually curate a really great experience for them. And again, it's about pushing them to start to drive their own learning as they move from rookie to intern grad. So yeah, it's really nice. It takes kids a while when they come in from school to kind of learn to trust the adults in the room. And so we always call term one reorientation, and we'll get the sir, miss, or putting your hand up to go to the toilet. We're like, no, that's weird. You wouldn't do that in a workplace. You can just go to the toilet when you like. So yeah, it kind of feeds into everything. within the IDEA culture, and the fact that we're not a school, we call ourselves a young adult work environment, and all of our kind of expectations, behavior management is modeled off, well, what would fly in a workplace? And if it wouldn't fly at a workplace, it doesn't fly at IDEA. So then that kind of feeds into that classroom versus real world context. We didn't want it to be that they're, separated from the real world and they're coming into this random space where it's just about worksheets and tests and content. And then, you graduate, it's like, okay, well, good luck with your life and go and learn all those adult skills. So it's really important to us in the design of our program and even our spaces, and the fact that we're not, we don't have an institution with 200 or more kids. It's co-learning hubs that are dotted around to really maintain that personalization and the smallness. And so how we do the real world integration is on the one hand, we often have the real world coming in. So adults, often parents, putting their hands up to come in as guest speakers or run career workshops or panels, come in for mentoring. And equally, we'll just bring in people to run workshops. And then equally for the kids to go out as well. So on those flexible learning days, which we'll touch on in a second, we really do want to encourage kids to get out and about, either studying additional qualifications, if that's what their aspirations are, or getting into volunteering or work placements, because the learning is invaluable. So then in terms of the actual learning, what are they doing? It's all projects. So we don't have siloed subjects like science, maths, English, HAS. The foundational literacy, foundational numeracy, all of that is woven into the fabric of our qualifications and program, and it's delivered through projects that the kids are kind of driving, and again, increasing in complexity as they move through the program. And so the kids provide the context, and that provides the motivation for the projects, and they're the kind of skills that we're trying to deliver is, how do you manage projects? How do you manage your own time? How do you manage yourself? How do you define your goals? All those kind of things. And again, as mentioned, kids then provide the context. So we often say, we don't teach maths. And I certainly, as the maths teacher in the room, and anyone who's familiar with a maths classroom, you always get the hand up saying, when are you ever going to need this in the real world? And, my response was often like, well, yeah, if you're not going to be an engineer, you probably won't use quadratic equations going forward, but here we are. And so we don't teach maths as a subject. We do embed that foundational numeracy of what are they going to need in the real world around budgeting, compound interest, timetabling, all those kind of things. But hey, if a kid is super interested in maths, and we did have a student one year, Aaron, who was like, I want to be a mathematician. And so how did we customize for him? Well, he was doing micro-credentials at UWA in Curtin in astrophysical concepts, calculus. His mentor was a PhD astrophysicist at Curtin. So he was maths all the way. So again, it's finding that baseline of skills that all kids are going to need transferable to any industry, and then saying to the young person, like, hey, what kind of niche content areas do you want to focus on? And even if your interests change, they'll probably change hundreds of times throughout your time at IDEA. That's okay, because nothing is a wasted experience. Everything goes into your portfolio, every work experience, every volunteering experience, and every project, even if it's an epic fail. Like, it's a great story to tell. Where we do teach more explicitly, we call them master classes. And so anytime we're teaching a new skill or a new concept, we kind of do a more explicit delivery, and then that kind of feeds into the project application. I mentioned we sometimes have parents coming in to run master classes. One of our favorite series is the Adulting 101 for grads, and we have a financial planner that we often bring in to look at budgeting and cost of living. And all of our grads always leave with major anxiety at the end of it, because they're like, oh, well, so basically I can't afford to live. And ultimately, like, yeah, that's true, you can't. Good luck with your adult life now. Be gone. So yeah, it's always an interesting one. In terms of our approach, then, what sits behind IDEA? I mean, there's been many influences in our model, but two key things that we always talk to is, one, from a kind of teaching and learning perspective, our pedagogical approach. And I came across this slide many years ago, and it was really transformational for me in understanding, well, why is senior secondary, and particularly from year 9 and 10, it's often known as the black hole of education, where teenagers start to drop off and disengage. And this, to me, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So what this is these are different approaches to learning, or theories of learning, and typically they're age group specific. So pedagogy is the teaching of children, andragogy, typically the teaching of adults, and pedagogy is more, we usually talk about PhD level learning. So schools are predominantly modeled on this pedagogical approach, where you have a teacher expert up the front, directing everything and basically teaching content to their young people. Now, this is appropriate, certainly for the younger years. But as you move into year 9, 10, 11, and 12, kids aren't buying it anymore. They know that they can learn so much online, for example, and they don't need to just be sitting and listening and waiting for a teacher to instruct. And so what we try to do at IDEA, we bring in more of an andragogical approach, so self-directing your learning. And again, it's a bit of a step. We're not expecting them to all come in and be like self-determined learners. But for our rookie program, it's very much shifting away from the adult being the leader and kids kind of sitting passive, just waiting to be fed worksheets or content. You guys can self-direct, like let's have a more collaborative approach. Yes, there's an adult in the room, but we're really there to guide, and you guys can also learn from each other. And you can teach each other as well. So it's kind of setting up that as the approach. And then definitely as we move into kind of intern and particularly grad, it's really like, right, how are we self-determining our own learning? So, hey guys, how do you teach yourself? How do you curate your own learning program? Because our view on that is if we can teach our young people to teach themselves, then we've given them all of the foundational skills to be successful in life. And so this is very much around our project focus of being able to develop your own project ideas, and even in the flexibility of how we deliver, and kids deciding what they want to work on at different times. It really kind of influences everything we do in our approach. And again, it's much more motivating for a young person, particularly at 15 or 14 plus, to feel like they're in charge of their own destiny. They have choice, they have autonomy. And again, that shift from the adults telling them what to do to the adults actually backing them and supporting and guiding them. And it's a really important focus, which actually then feeds into our rites of passage approach, which Nick will talk to around acknowledging that transition.
Sorry. Yeah, look, I guess that this is the fabric that IDEA is kind of built upon, the foundation of our program. And we one of the things that in the design of IDEA we realize is that our society is really terrible at providing rites of passage for our young people. And that's why we see a lot of the risk-taking behavior that occurs around 16 to 18, 19 for some students. And they're essentially in the absence of a strong community and a strong relationship with adult mentors, I guess, or elders, then they seek to find their own community. And so we're in year 5, as I said before, we're in year 5 of the program where we see this rite of passage play out over and over again, where the young person is essentially the initiate. They go on a challenge, they separate from their normal community, and they go on their own journey. And at IDEA, we walk alongside the young people. And I think that that's probably one of the most satisfying things that we experience as IDEA staff, is that we build such a great rapport with our young people, almost like a mutual respect relationship, because we're more collegiate than than that hierarchical kind of relationship that they get at school. And so therefore it actually provides the strength and the courage and the resilience that each young person needs to kind of navigate this really uncertain, rocky road that is the pathway from adolescence to adulthood. And so we've created a lot of moments in the program to be able to pause and reflect at each stage. Term 1 very much about building the container, and we're not giving them the rules, so per se, of what IDEA needs to be. Each cohort's going to design their own culture, and by designing it, they have to own it and be responsible as well for kind of managing that. There's sometimes a little bit of a wobble around term 2, where their defense mechanisms have kind of all been abolished, I guess, and the accountability really sets in. But that's a brilliant point in time for us as the parents and the IDEA team to work together to say, you got this, how do you want it to be? And then we see each year that term 3 and 4, the kids have really kind of created some agency and autonomy in their learning, and really take off from there. So it becomes incredible. They embody the learning and the experience, I think, and we have learned to really trust this process as well at IDEA.
So yeah, in terms of the program then and how that looks, so we mentioned co-learning and flex. We manage young people 5 days a week, but 3 days a week of those are what we call co-learning. That's where they're studying doing our projects, which embed our qualifications, and then 2 days a week of flexible learning. So totally flex depending on the aspirations and goals of the young person. So again, they could be studying additional qualifications, maybe doing uni ready, or doing some university units, or they might be on work placement, volunteering. Perhaps they need just a chill day to defrag and decompress at home. Or they might be on site doing some independent study or additional online study. So again, those flexible days are really just dependent on the young person and how much push and or essentially what they need in their program. But all students will complete. The backbone of IDEA really is these nationally recognised vocational education training qualifications. So at our Year 10 alternative rookie, typically Certificate 2 level, and then on into Cert 3 and Cert 4, and then a diploma extension for those that want it. The great thing about VET is it's really about stage as opposed to age. So it's totally flexible. We have some students that would have been in year 11 that maybe due to school refusal or, maybe health challenges, they're deciding to start at rookie. Equally, we have some that are like just ready to jump the gun. They want to get started on uni early and they might jump into grad. So that flexibility exists. And there's even flexibility kind of within the term as well. And that was one of the reasons why we ultimately decided to become a vocational education and training, a training provider, because a vet just provides infinite flexibility. It's about being able to be job ready. And so again, it's far more appropriate, we feel, for our young people at this senior secondary age of kind of 14 plus, because it's just about preparing for the real world.
I just jump in there, Beck. So really with the co-learning days, so the baseline of IDEA, and Beck will explain this this now, are the credentials. If you head off to TAFE or a private training provider, it's very sequential. Today we're doing this unit and we're going to work towards that, then do the assessment and move to the next. So the IDEA program, essentially to create this alternative to school, we had to either be a training provider or an employer. Absolutely not going to employ a whole bunch of 14-year-olds, that's for sure, 14 and 15-year-olds. But the vocational education is not the point of IDEA, it's the structure that our program fits around. And so co-learning days are really, really important. That's where we kind of put the meat on the bone, and that's where we kind of get to personalize. And the other really important bit about that is, with co-learning, is that each young person is assigned an experience lead, and that's really, really great because that experience lead is their ultimate case manager. Yes, they deliver the program, but they are responsible for the relationship with you as parents and the progress of that young person. And just not having that switch up is really, really important for that the young people can actually know who their person is for the year, and they know who their cohort is, and get, we kind of eliminate a lot of the fallout of switching their mindset and focus every 45 minutes and having to build relationships with multiple teachers across different subject areas.
So yeah, if you're not familiar with VET, how it works is essentially that you have a qualification that's built up of units of competence. So this is our rookie suite. We have 2 Certificate 2s that we deliver in a numeracy skill set. So it sounds pretty dry when you read the actual qualifications that sit behind this. But the reason we've picked these qualifications, as I mentioned earlier, is because they ultimately offer those kind of transferable skills that you can embed any kind of niche content area within. So things like plan and apply time management, whether you're interested in, fashion design or furniture making or becoming a mathematician, like everyone's going to need to know how to plan and apply time management and kind of operate in a digital world. So again, the qualifications we pick allow for that. The other great thing about VET as opposed to school curriculum and general curriculum, well, firstly, they are actual qualifications. So the WAIS being a certificate and the ATAR being a score, whereas with VET, you're actually walking away with nationally recognised qualification. So it's definitely not the point to just do the qualifications on IDEA. It's about doing rich projects. But even if a kid was just to coast through and do our qualifications, for our rookies, for example, they'd be among the most qualified year 10s in the country because they would have 2 Certificate 2s and that numeracy skill set. And so with the units of competence, they're integrated into our programs. There's multiple opportunities for a young person to demonstrate competency. And that's really the work of the experience lead, is to navigate that and to kind of generate the evidence in collaboration with the young person to show that they are competent and can do these things. And once you have a unit of competence in the bag, again, that's nationally recognized. So there's all these building blocks that nothing is wasted. I used to hate each semester in my science teaching. A kid would be getting by, just getting a C, and then they'd bomb out in an exam because they, hate exams. And all of that learning that goes for nothing then if their grade average is a D, and it doesn't count towards the waste. So again, it just, yeah, it's not as flexible a system, whereas vet certainly offers that. And all of our qualifications then sit within that Australian qualifications framework. Nick, did you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, I think that's just a really important point, that the really nice thing about starting at the year 10 alternative there is, to Beck's point, if you bomb out in year 10 of your with your subjects, and more importantly, if you don't meet the WACE requirements, you're left with nothing. But every unit that a young person completes within their credential, and we aim and are usually quite successful with getting most, if not all, of our young people to a credential, is they actually have something at the end of every single year at IDEA. And it's the same goes with university. So if you do a year of your degree or a semester of your degree and you decide it's not for you, all you leave with is a HEC step. So vocational education and training is really, really clever that way, is that it actually is focused on skills and providing recognition of that learning through the credentials. So the senior secondary certificate, or the WACE, within the Australian Qualification Framework, which is actually internationally recognised, this framework, sits outside of it. So those young people that are doing the WACE and ATAR, great, but that credential doesn't actually fit within, is not necessarily currency within the hierarchy of credentials within Australia. And if you notice that our young people at grad level will leave with multiple certificates, but working towards that AQF level 4. And level 4 is supervisory level. So our young people can leave IDEA and very confidently go into a project management role with the business qualifications. That's the focus that we have throughout our program, is that we are preparing our young people to be brilliant project managers. Some of our young people also, through their portfolio and flex days, have actually got some AQF level 7, some bachelor degree units under their belt as well.
So in terms of the student experience and what a day or a week in the life of IDEA students look like, this is how it kind of translates on our timetable. This is one of the rookie timetables for this year. So you'll see that this student, their flex days are on Monday and Wednesday, and then 3 co-learning days, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then very similar to a workplace, there's kind of morning check-in, you stand up meeting, what's on for the day or the week. And then there's kind of a flow of like master classes where we're coming together. And then most of the time is the project sprints where they're just working on their projects, and there's some choice there in terms of what they're wanting to focus on each day. And that's the opportunity for the adults in the room to kind of move around and work individually with students. And then we often come together for things like Community Connect, where that's where we might have guest speakers or go out on excursions or have topical talks. So then how does that translate into what it looks like on a co-learning day? I mean, obviously the project sprint time is some of the key focus, but that's where we can kind of embed in some other experiences as well. And depending on the hub that we're in, so these are all Perth-based photos, but it's always important for us that wherever we are, that we're kind of engaging with the community and taking advantage of the things on offer. And this is very much true in Frio as well. We've had the mayor in a couple of times already and have been out and about in the community. So these ones here, examples are from some of the things that we've done with our Perth campus. We do things like What's Your Jam Wednesday. We don't have PE, but they've done things like Reformer Pilates, boxing for mental health. Again, it's kind of the young people have a bit of a choice in what they want to do there. We go out on excursions often to the museum and whatnot, the art galleries. But then particularly what I mentioned earlier about bringing the real world in on those co-learning days. And so where there is like networking opportunities for young people, particularly as part of the Space Cube community, we'll take advantage of that. And this photo here it's on my left anyway, I'm not sure if it's on your left or right, but you can't really see the two women at the front there, but Isabel and Maria came in from Better Labs, which is a venture fund upstairs in Flux. And so they have a thing called Studio Startup, but they basically employ entrepreneurs to come up with startup ideas. And Isabel and Maria came down to the IDEA campus to workshop an idea with our kids back in, I think it was 2023, for a mental health app. And the kids kind of poo-pooed it straight away. They're like, no, we wouldn't really use it. And ultimately what the kids said they wanted to learn was around investing and how do we start an investment portfolio as an under 18. And this was really cool because this was then when Isabel and Maria came back about 6 months later to then test their idea for this investment app. And it was cool because the kids could see that this is the process that you just go through if you have an idea and you want to execute it. So things were breaking and the kids were giving lots of feedback. And then cut to 2 years or 18 months later, Drip Invest was launched as the first investment platform for teenagers and parents on the App Store. So again, it was like really cool example of our young people seeing that this is how any idea can be executed. Is you start with an idea, you do some research, you speak to people, you test things, you break them, and then you just keep going until it's either not a good idea anymore, or it's pivoted, or you reach success. So those kind of design thinking skills are kind of embedded throughout our program. And again, it's just a really great opportunity for the kids to see how it translates into the real world, and then also to make those network connections. So often when businesses come in, work opportunities will come out of that for our young people. I think our most popular one was, we had what were they called, Space Jump. It was like Space Jump, an esports,
Yeah, Space Jump,
gaming platform, bringing esports to Perth. And once the kids heard that, yeah, you could make like $8 million in prize money for just gaming, I think everybody's career aspirations changed. And there was about 7 people then that signed up to do work with the Space Draft or Space Jump, anyway, whatever they're called. Nick, did you want to speak to some of the flex learning experiences?
Yeah, so look, as I said before, flex learning is where the personalization really happens at IDEA. We've said we don't do anything that we don't need at IDEA, and so that's why we wanted to create as much space for our young people to maximize this time out of school, I guess, and to have them, to help them prepare for life beyond school. I always say that the mission for our students, is particularly with flex days while they're at IDEA, is to either identify what they want to do or like, to some of them come in with some idea, so we ask that they clarify whether that's the right path for them. So there's a bit of testing of different options for themselves in particular different industries, or accelerate. So some of our students also come in going, this is exactly what I want to do. We want them to be 10 steps ahead of where they would be if they stayed at school. So we've got Tom there holding a certificate. He was ironically actually created a mental health app for teenagers, the Candy Crush of mental health apps, and he took that idea to a business accelerator program, the +8 pre-accelerator. We noticed that he was just so dedicated to it, and he was pretty phenomenal actually as an entrepreneur, and he actually ended up winning the +8 pre-accelerator and going on to great things. Malia uses her flex day. She's a grad this year. She wants to be a doctor, and is very, very capable. And so she's been doing university units through our partnerships with Curtin. She's also doing a ton of micro-credentials in human biology, and she's also doing, she's a very busy girl, she's also doing the university preparation courses to get into health sciences and then switch to medicine in semester 2 next year. So our partnerships with unis are that IDEA opens the door for university, so students can get into university through our program. The English language competence requirement, it just requires our students to do the communications units from an enabling program for a couple of the universities, and it's actually relatively easy to get into to other universities. So our students essentially attend uni at the same time as their peers without doing the WACE or the ATAR, and Malia is certainly on that pathway. She also works at a pharmacy to kind of get into the industry and get around medical terminology and support. We have Jack and Teak here, who are our film buffs. They are now alumni. They were grads last year, and they spent their entire year working for a photographer or on film sets, creating their own films, which is what they did on flex days, and they're off studying. And actually Jack's got a job this year at the New Perth Film Studios. And then we have beautiful Ash, who's there on the tools. Ash is our shortest term student. She's lasted 6 months with IDEA. And when I say lasted, it's actually because she found her new pathway. And we always measure our success on the quality of the pathway and the transition of that young person. And we set Ash up. When she landed, she said, I'm a creative, but I also think I might like building things, so maybe set design. So we got her out onto a work experience with another Ash, who is a female construction company owner, and little Ash and big Ash hit it off, and so she was offered an apprenticeship within a few weeks actually of joining this company, and we were so thrilled that she got that opportunity as well.
Alrighty. I'm conscious of the time, guys. We've gone a little bit over, but we've just got a short amount left. So we'll just touch on the rites of passage. Nick spoke to this earlier, but yeah, we didn't want to get rid of everything. We wanted to keep some things from school, including the holidays. That's a keeper. But then things like the school ball, the camp, graduation. So all of those key milestones that are important to young people at this age, we've kept. Our grads are about to go off next week on their grad camp down south. And again, it's an opportunity for community building, but just to take a pause as well and acknowledge the journey that our young people are on. We'll show a quick video on a day in the life, and then we'll talk about next steps. I always think of all the cool stories from each of those kids, but conscious of the time, I won't keep rabbiting on about it. All of the different experiences. And look, what's it all leading towards? It's our IDEA portfolio. So every student at IDEA graduates with a portfolio, which is essentially like a very fancy resume. It's a digital footprint and includes things like their vocational qualifications that they've received at IDEA and maybe in addition to IDEA. University units and enabling pathways or courses if that's what they've been focused on, and certainly work experiences, paid and unpaid, volunteering experiences, and then every project becomes a piece of the portfolio as well, a way to showcase the types of things they have done in IDEA. And again, that becomes their kind of piece that is the ticket to whether it's university for the training or employment. It's their kind of professional footprint to start their early career. And where do they typically go after IDEA? Many of our students will go on to further training, so either going to university or onto TAFE for private training. Some will go straight into employment. Some have their own gigs. It's always interesting when our grads have their own little businesses, and they're harder and harder to track down. So like, oh, sorry, I had a client meeting. I'm like, oh, sorry, very impressed with you, but we do miss you. Some students will have a place at uni, but they'll decide to take a gap year. And so we talk to them about the idea of a strategic gap year and ensuring that on that gap year, you're earning or learning relevant to your future industry. And then other students who might have only joined us in grad will sometimes continue on with to finish up with our diploma. Alrighty, I'll skip over Kira. Sorry, Kira, bye-bye. She was one of our alumni, and we'll just talk about next steps. Nicole.
So how does this all work? Obviously not being a school, and as I referenced the School Education Act before, our program is recognised or permitted to be a alternative to schooling. And so our young people who are in year 10 or would be year 10 aged, we put them through an exemption. So that is a form. Because there is actually mandatory curriculum around year 10, it's a little bit more of a process, there's a bit more scrutiny applied to that. So that's as simple as a form signed off by the principal. If you're a homeschooler, your moderator or the regional office signs off on that, and then it goes to the DG for signing. If you're at public school. I know that the principals can actually sign off on the exemption themselves. Or once the young person is year 11 or 12 age, it's actually quite a simple process. All that the department's actually responsible for knowing where every school age student is. And so we've got a great relationship with them because we now have over 200 young people. So they're very grateful that we have this two-way communication to let them know where the young people are. So the notice of arrangement is about a 3-page form that is signed, and we just provide our details. When I say our details, so IDEAcademy is the organisation and the main program, but our credentials are actually delivered through our own training provider called Newer Learn. So the exemption and the notice of arrangement, the provider is Newer Learn because that's the credentialing agent for the approved alternative. So that's how that works. So in terms of next steps, we are literally weeks away from starting our recruiting for next year, which is terrifying. Oh my goodness. We're talking about 2027 soon. So if your young person is in year 9 or younger currently, scan this QR code and we can put you on the wait list, and we'll contact you in the next couple of weeks actually to get you in for your interviews for next year. We do have a few spots left this year in our Perth campus, and a few more in Fremantle. As we said before, we've just launched Fremantle this year, and man, it is a very cool place to be. But just as we did in 2022, we've got a smaller cohort. We won't actually take any more than 28 students for that group, and we've nearly maxed out there. But there is still time to kind of get your young person enrolled. They haven't missed too much. It's not like there's going to be huge amounts to catch up on, and that's the benefit of young people who join a few weeks late, is that we've got those flex days to do a little bit of catch up if they require. So there's certainly still time to do that. All of our rookies, for instance, they're all new, so you're not the only new kid. Many of our interns are, or most of our interns are new. We've actually got 3 streams of that this year, and I'd say if you've got a young person who would be in year 12, it's getting very, very close to the end. We've only got about 1 spot left anyway in the grad program, so if we'd have to kind of move pretty fast on that. So if that's one of your young people for a 2026 start, please book in for that meeting pretty soon. If you don't see a spot, please reach out to us at info@IDEAcademy and say you haven't been able to find a meeting space so that we can get you in as soon as possible for those interviews.
Okay, guys, with that, we've finished our info session. At this point, realizing it's already 10 minutes over the time, either you can check out, we'll send you an email with the links and follow up, or if you wanted to pop any questions into the chat, feel free, or just simply you can pop up your hand or
we'll stick around for a few minutes.
Switch off your mic. Yeah, we'll stick around for a few minutes. So I can see Sam and Tony are chatting. It's Sam and or Tony. If you did want to just pop off your microphone and ask a question, you absolutely can. It might be something that other people have. Otherwise, yeah, I'll wait for you to check. Might just be saying thanks for an info session and good luck.
Tony,
okay.
that's totally fine. You'll just have to come in for us to meet you.
I'll just stop recording now. Do that.